Welcome back to the Computer Hardware and OS Essentials lecture series. This is a custom created lecture series based on A+ certification program, and today we will cover lesson number 2, which is computer types and parts. The primary objective of this lesson is to introduce you to basic computer types, basic computer parts, and how to select those parts based on the needs, as well as we will go over the precautions and preventative maintenance once you have installed those parts and other basic safety tips. So let's look at computer types. So the computer types includes desktop computers, often referred to as PCs and towers, and they are typically larger in form factor, but they are much easier to upgrade and work with as a computer technician. All-in-one computers, they look like these. They are typically similar to that of a laptop in terms of repairability. It is much harder to replace certain items. Maybe for example, the RAM may be soldered onto the motherboard itself and not removable, as opposed to a desktop device, something like this. So there is some compact design going on here with all-in-one computers, but then repairability may not be always as flexible as a desktop computer. Then you have the option of picking mini PCs. So most corporations and organizations may go with these type of mini PCs, such as shown here. They are very small, but however, they are typically more powerful than a laptop or other smaller devices such as an iPad or something like that. Plus they can run Windows as well as Linux full-blown operating system, and could provide similar or close to that of a desktop office computer at a much smaller form factor. Laptops, those become very popular along with the mini PCs during the COVID-19 period, because most corporations and companies and businesses have sent their workers home with such small devices. So they either pick mini PCs or laptops. One of the biggest advantage of laptops is that it allows mobility for your end users without having to worry about any cables or other things that need to go with it. Like for example, if they have a desktop computer, they have to take the keyboard, the mouse and everything else with it, and they are heavy and they have to lug around and etc. That all get eliminated by using a laptop. Again, the disadvantage of laptop would be upgradability can be an issue and can be costly. So laptop RAM usually can be replaced by the front-end technician. However, the RAM may be cost higher than that of the desktop RAM. And if there is any other issues associated with the laptop, you cannot configure like a desktop, as I mentioned, because let's say you have a person in your organization who use AutoCAD, and you have picked a laptop with a lower graphic support, GPU, graphic processing unit. Then there's no way to replace that GPU, right? There is no way you can change the graphic card of a laptop. You can do that with a desktop. You can do that with the all-in-ones and laptops. So keep that in mind. Tablets are very useful in certain areas, such as if you have work in the oil and gas field, or if you have ever worked in the areas where you go to the customer the customer site, a remote site. Sometimes tablets, whether if they are iPads or Android tablets with custom software, can satisfy those needs. So you can have your sales force or your engineering force going to the field with a tablet with all the data that they needed, and then that tablet can connect to a server remotely to access the data that they need to be accessed. So that's a really good option even in a corporate environment. So a lot of people don't think about that in the like couple of years ago, but now with the technology being moving forward so fast, and that's one of the options that people use. Same goes for the smartphones. smartphones came a long way. Nowadays, you can even do presentations on smartphones. So you can actually use something like the Samsung S22 Ultra, or even a lower grade cell phone, or an iPhone, for example. Any even the mid-grade iPhones, you can connect to a projector and you can actually do your presentation on the smartphone. So they are still business devices as well as consumer devices. Finally, the servers. So servers can be small business servers or enterprise servers. If you are following the A+ certification program, they do not go into any detail on servers. But however, in this particular custom created lecture series, I will do a lecture on servers, and I may cover servers here and there, because I think as an IT technician in the 21st century, especially in 2022, it is pretty bad that you to know all about consumer electronics side of IT, but have very little knowledge on servers. So even though the A+ certification program do not cover servers, I will cover servers with respect to small business servers as well as enterprise servers in my future lectures. So keep in mind, servers are a computer type. It's actually you can make it similar to that of a desktop computer, but it is not the same as a desktop computer, because it has certain form factors as well as it has certain configurations of hardware that may not be able to be installed on a regular typical desktop computers. So while there may be small businesses that are running typical desktop computers as their servers, it is always recommended that you buy a small business dedicated server or an enterprise server for that specific needs, because those servers have specialized hardware that can support certain functions and features that are not available on desktop computers. So again, the A+ certification program do not go any depth or not even cover hardly cover anything to do with servers, but I will in this lecture series in the next few weeks. So let's look at some basic computer parts, because this lecture we are doing just a broad overview. As we go through my next few lectures, we will go into depth of each of these computer parts, but for now let's look at a broad overview of computer parts. So we have the hard drive. That can be traditional hard drives with a disk that rotating, which is a disk platter hard drives. They look like these. Or they could be SSDs, which are solid state drives, which becoming more popular as the cost associated per gigabyte of data being driven down as more and more manufacturers coming into SSD field, as well as the manufacturing process becoming cheaper. So like for example, about 5 years ago when I bought a Samsung SSD, a 500 gigabyte Samsung SSD cost me almost like $500. Now a 500 gigabyte SSD can be bought it for $150 or less. So there's a huge price drop in SSD costs, but still the traditional hard drives are cheaper per gigabyte than an SSD. So in corporate environment, especially corporate servers, you will come across enterprise regular hard drives with the disk platters, because that can handle more data for a cheaper cost. So you can have 10 terabyte regular traditional hard drives on a computer, as opposed to having a 10 terabyte SSD, because it's going to be astronomical, the price difference when you go to a higher tiers of the space. So that's why we still use the SSDs and traditional drive. And again, we will go into depth of hard drives in a separate lecture. This is just an overview. Another computer part is the video card. Some computers, especially computers that are geared towards consumers, may have integrated video cards. Laptops, for example, almost always comes with an integrated video card, and sometimes a dedicated video card as well. But in the typical cheaper grade consumer laptop will have integrated video cards, and as higher grade laptops and desktops will have a separate video card. Separate video card can provide you with more functions and support for video rendering compared to integrated video card. Keyboard, that is an input-output device along with the mouse, which is right here, is typically being interacted with the interacted by the end user to provide instructions to your computer. So that is still considered as a computer part, and it is the primary input output device for most users in most cases, right? Other than the joysticks and other stuff. Display, so again, if you have an all-in-one or a laptop, it will be built in, integrated. If not, it's going to be a separate display such as a monitor. Power supply unit or power supply, that also depend on the type of computer or server that you are using. Servers comes with also redundancy power supplies, which you won't typically see with consumer grade desktop computers. Like even my computer here that I have spent $3,000 building do not have a redundancy power supply because there's no need for it. But when you go into high-end computers, you will have redundancy power supplies, especially with servers. And the power, again, I will go over power supply consideration and things like that on a separate video. Same with the motherboard. It is a very important part of your computer. That is pretty much the brains of the operations that holds everything together, along with the chipset. I haven't listed the chipset here, which I should have. Motherboard, again, I will do a separate lecture on the motherboard where you can learn about that with respect to this course lecture series. When it comes to point motherboard and the chipset, or the Intel processor, when I say chipset, the processor chipset is different actually. So the motherboard and processor play a vital role in how the data is processed and how powerful your computer going to be. So the motherboard and the processor are key components of your computer as well. RAM or random access memory, that is also an important part. Again, I will go over them in detail in the next few lectures. Case. So here's another thing a lot of people forget. The computer case itself is a computer part. Yep, case is also a computer part. Even though a lot of people don't look at that way, your case selections may impact the performance of your computer too, even though it's just a physical part that doesn't do any electronic things such as processing or saving data or displaying any information, nothing. But the computer case do have and can have an impact and on your performance of your computer. How? Well, let's say you buy a consumer grade desktop computer a case, and then you install a server grade hardware. Those server grade hardware may produce more heat than the consumer grade hardware, causing your case to not to support that type of hardware, hence heating up your computer. Let's say you buy a consumer grade parts and you put it into a case that doesn't have proper airflow. Again, it's gonna still result in the same issue. There are a lot of other YouTubers such as Nexus Gamers and Linus Tech Tubes, Tech Tips. Those guys have done tests on those cases. That pretty much prove that computer case is still an important computer part that you should think about. So it's not just a pretty looking case, but it does function as a vital component for your overall health of your device. So keep that in mind. I already went over the mouse as an input-output device, and the other specialized input-output devices other than the mouse and keyboard. Those include the printers, joysticks, any other input devices such as electronic or digitized drawing pads. Those are all considered as input-output devices, and other specialized parts. So with servers especially, you may have RAID cards, riser cards, out of band service cards, also known as OOBs, out of band services systems, such as light out systems, etc., etc. All of those things become specialized parts that still part of your overall computer. Again, when I cover the server lecture, I will cover the RAID cards, RISA cards, and OOBs, etc., etc. And when I cover the input and output devices, I will cover the printers, joysticks, mouse, keyboard, and etc. And motherboard will be covered in a different lecture, and RAM will be covered in a different lecture, and etc., etc. So if there are lectures coming up, this is still the starting point of my lecture series. This is just the second lecture, so stay tuned. The stuff are coming up in the future. Okay, so keep that in mind. So on the right hand side, I pick an image from the textbook called The Complete CompTIA A Plus Guide to IT Hardware and Software 8th edition. This image is a really good image that basically summarize a typical computer parts configuration. So you have the user at the very top and you have the parts at the very bottom. So if you start from the video card and the hard drive, those gonna interact along with the keyboard with the operating system, and the operating system is consist of the device drivers and the kernel. So the kernel and the device drivers are part of the operating system, and they're going to interact with the hardware such as the hard drive, video card, and keyboard. And then the user going to interact through the application software and other directly with the operating system and the application software, so that user can interact with the hardware. So users do not directly interact with the hard drive. Users do not directly interact with the video card. Users do not directly interact with let's say a RAID card, for example, or a power supply or anything like that. What users are doing is users are using the operating system and the software applications. It could be a Word file or this presentation file to interact with the hardware within your computer or server. So that's what's showing here. So this is a really nice summary that you should know if you are especially new to computer hardware and A+ certification programs. This is a really nice summarization of overall picture of how computer parts can be interacted by the end user. So let's switch gear a little bit and let's look at how we can select parts. So the end user have certain needs and wants. So as a computer technician or a frontline computer support staff, you should always pay attention to either your end user or your management. If you're working for a large organization, looking for your expertise in picking up computer parts, you have to listen to your management. Or if you are directly dealing with the customer, in this case your end users, you need to listen to their needs and wants. So needs are different from wants, because I may need a fast computer because I'm running a CAD program, as opposed to I want a fast computer because I just love fast computers, even though the only thing I ever do is record videos, like basic videos like this one. So those are two different things. So that plays into budget and other things. So you can discuss with your customers based on their, not only their needs, but also their wants. Service requirements, like for example, especially with servers, you need to ask your customer or end client that, hey, do you want us to install an enterprise server in your small business environment because you are expecting your company to grow at a certain pace? So maybe installing a small business server in a small business right now may not be a good idea. You probably want to install an enterprise grade server because your company, that small business, is expected to grow as a medium size or large scale business within the next couple of months to years. So service requirements matter, especially to servers. In addition to that, with specifically servers and business equipment, even business desktop computers, you also need to look into service supports. That is called the serviceability and support availability right here. It's a little bit down on the list. In certain situations, it may be beneficial for you to directly order parts from organizations such as Dell, IBM, HP, etc. Their business side of things, because it comes with long-term serviceability agreements or long-term service agreements and support attached to it. So as an IT technician, you can let your end user or your management knows, hey, if we buy the IBM business computers or servers, or if we buy the Dell business computers, it comes with a service agreement that would benefit us more than buying just individual computers at a consumer level and just installing on our corporate or small business network. So keep that in mind. So sometimes if you directly buy from IBM or HP and Dell, not sometimes, actually there is an option for all of these companies where you can actually buy through their business and small business and enterprise programs that comes with a service agreement and support availability agreements. So keep that in mind when you are trying to deal with customers who are corporate or small business customers, because they might want that kind of support directly from the manufacturer rather than going through you. And also it may allow you to give your end user a valued added service. So let's say you are a small IT company, right? And you buy HP printers. And imagine those HP printers are plotters. So those are like large plotters for let's say an oil and gas company that is constantly printing large maps, right? It's going to be pretty hard for you to find those HP parts needed for that plotter whenever they breaks. So if you have a service agreement with the HP business side and a support agreement, you can get direct access to the parts that are really hard to find in Canada. Because HP will find that part from China or United States or any other country and get it to you because you have a service agreement, a business service agreement for HP plotters. So think about that. So it's not just that you are trying to attach a service agreement directly with your end user and the manufacturer. You can actually have a service agreement between you and the manufacturer as well as an IT company, a small IT company. So keep that in mind. Again, I will go into depth maybe in a separate lecture as well. This is just an overview. So you need to think about that, service requirements and the serviceability and support availability. Types of applications. So software and devices that will be connected to a device matters. So depending on the organization, the end user that you are installing your devices, make sure that you discuss the type of applications the users may be using. So some specialized software may require specialized tools. So keep that in mind when you are installing devices for your end user. An example of such would be, like as I mentioned, is AutoCAD. Certain AutoCAD rendering won't work with integrated graphic card. AutoCAD requires the user to have a dedicated graphic card in order to run this high-end CAD design. So in that case, the type of application require a graphic card, and you're going to tell your end user you need to have graphic cards installed, dedicated graphic card installed on all of their company's engineering department computers because they are running AutoCAD. That's an example of that. And the connected devices example could be certain software may require the end user to use specialized tools such as digital drawing pads. So if you're working for a digital marketing company, you make sure that those drawing pads are supported and purchased accordingly. Cost and benefit analysis. So you need to ask the question, do they really need an enterprise desktop? So they might. So if your end user is a small business, they might not. So think about that. Do they really need the enterprise desktop and those serviceability and support availability? If they don't, then just purchase even a consumer grade desktop would be fine in certain situations. So it's a case by case use case scenario. Scalability options. As I mentioned, the motherboard expansion slots, how many expansion slots you would like to have for future scalability. Multi video card support. You may have a situation where you need multiple video cards for 3D rendering. Things like that. So keep that in mind. Or if you are selling a computer to a gamer, for example, if your end user is just a gaming person, think about the video card, for example. So that the scalability options matters. RAM slots, for example, at the beginning they might need only 16 gigabyte of RAM. However, they expect more RAM usage. Then make sure that you always have some scalability. So when I recommend desktop computers, especially to my family, friends, and my customers and my end users, I always make sure there is some form of availability of expansion slots, whether they are RAM slots, PCIe, PCI slots. I always make sure that there is some form of availability. So for example, I don't populate the motherboard with the maximum configuration possibility. So for, let's say my motherboard support 128 gigabyte of RAM maximum. If the user need 128 gigabyte of RAM, I don't know, for whatever the reason, or let's say 120 gigabyte of RAM, I'm not going to buy that motherboard. Because reason that is, I'm probably gonna go for a 256 gigabyte RAM support motherboard. I'm talking about like server motherboards, for example. Because reason for that is, you don't want to buy the lowest tier, so that the future expandability is impossible. So keep that in mind. Even my current motherboard right now, I have few slots available for more RAM that I can install in the future. I never populate all the RAM slots unless I really needed that right now. So when you first build the computer, try to not to populate all the RAM, all the SATA slots, and all the all the PCI slots. Try to keep some of them available. Physical space and mobility needs. That's another things you need to consider when you're selecting parts. If the user is a remote user that works from home, it's probably a better idea to recommend a mini computer, or a better yet, a laptop computer with a desk device, which is like a docking device. So that would be a better idea than just giving people huge desktop computers to take home. So think about that. Also, new office spaces in Calgary, Canada, as well as Edmonton and Toronto, Vancouver. In many major cities in Canada nowadays, the major business trend is to have what we call the open space. So open space layout basically means that you can't actually put huge towers on the desk, because that would pretty much not going to work for open space idea, right? So when you discussing physical space, when you're looking at physical space, you had to look at the overall picture of the company and the company culture, and whether they're going to go with the open space concept where every employee can speak to the other employee without a wall, right? There are no cubicles. In that case, if you start putting up huge towers on each of those desks, what's going to happen is you're pretty much going to create the wall by that tower. So that's defeat the purpose. So think about that as well. The corporate culture, the floor plans, all of those things you need to think about when you're selecting parts as well. I already talked about the serviceability. Redundancy. Redundancy is also a key feature, especially when it's come to the point servers. Redundancy is very important in servers. And you need to have hard drive redundancy, you need to have chipset redundancy, you need to have processor redundancy, and you need to have RAM redundancy built into most servers in most situations, both the small, even small business sometimes, but especially in enterprise and large scale deployments of servers. Again, I will go into that in detail in my server lecture, but for now, just remember redundancy is important, especially for servers, but sometimes also for desktop computers. So you could have like 2 hard drives or solid state drives with the same capacity installed on a desktop small business server, sorry, desktop, small business desktop computer, or some kind of a end user device, and that may be copying data against each other because you really don't want to lose data. Even though it's a local backup, it's still better than having something going wrong, having everything on a one drive. I just want to point one caution here, especially because this is geared towards people who are just getting into computer science and hardware. Redundancy is not backup. Backup and redundancies are two different things. Redundancy is not something to do with backup. I will explain that in a separate extensive lecture sometimes later in this lecture series, but keep that in mind, in your back of your mind. Redundancy is not just backing up stuff. It's much more than that. And also there are other considerations you need to take into consideration when you are selecting parts that are not listed here, but I may cover as we go through some in-depth analysis on hardware and operating systems in this lecture series. This is just starting out. The first couple of lectures going to be very, very simple lectures, but as we go through these lectures, you will get to learn more and more about in-depth information on computer operating systems and hardware. So make sure you subscribe to my channel and thumbs up this video so that you will get to those videos as soon as I publish them to my YouTube channel. So now we're going to talk about precautions and preventative maintenance. So devices that users directly interact with will need to be serviced once in a while. I would say depend on, again, use case scenario and depending on where you are. So large corporations and organizations may not even do this kind of preventative maintenance at all, because it's probably cheaper for them to just replace the item when it breaks rather than start sending people with paid salaries to go and clean those things out. But still you need to think about this preventative maintenance, especially in a small business environment, small companies, as well as even large organizations. At least you need to know the preventative maintenance is important, especially where when you don't want to have a cost overrun because you are replacing items because you didn't do the preventative maintenance. So let's look at the devices that directly users interact with, especially. So mouse, keyboard, monitor, touchpad, drawing tablets, etc., joysticks, those are things that your end user will directly interact with, physically touch, physically hug, eat food in front of the computer and splash everywhere, which they're not supposed to do that, but things happen, right? You can't control every behavior of every human. So how do you clean those things? So make sure you wipe with a damp cloth, basically lint-free cloth, a damp lint-free cloth, because the lint is bad for computers. Use compressed air cans to clean those devices. So the hard to reach places and where dust accumulate, compressed air cans are a really good option. You can also shake out debris and use even vacuums. So if you have a keyboard, you can shake it out. Like if just shaking it sometimes can take the debris out of those crevices, right? Internal components. So for internal components, that means whatever the components inside your desktop computers or servers, you can use again compressed air cans and suitable vacuums. Again, I use the term suitable vacuum even on the previous bullet point right here. The reason why I use suitable vacuum instead of vacuum is that some CompTIA A+ textbooks and material that you will find, they will say use a vacuum. Well, if you use an industrial vacuum or even some home use vacuums to clean out your computers, that could break computer parts. I have a vacuum at home which is a shop vac. If I blow air from that shop vac onto my motherboard, I guarantee you one couple of parts going to break. because the air that coming out of that vacuum is too fast and high pressured. That pressure wave can break some of the computer parts. I had a friend who used a home vacuum, Dyson vacuum, instead of blowing out, to suck the dust into the Dyson vacuum, and that sucking is so strong, he broke the pin on a input output IO cable connector. So when you're using compressed air cans, it's okay most likely, because compressed air cans it's going to be really hard to make a damage unless you are holding the compressed air cans in the same place and pressing it down until the water droplets forms on that one part of your computer. So make sure when you're doing even compressed air cans, you go back and forth and not just stay there in one place. But so it's a little bit harder to make a damage with a compressed air can, but with a incorrect vacuum you can seriously damage your component. So make sure you use a suitable vacuum, preferably a vacuum that has a variable rate for either vacuuming, sucking up dirt, or blowing out. So either or. So make sure the type of vacuum that you use is a proper suitable one, so it is not blowing or sucking too much. Anti-static wrist strap or anti-static mats. So there are two types. The most common one is the anti-static wrist strap, which are wrist straps that you can put it onto your wrist. You probably have seen them, and you can hook it up to your desktop, and then you can make sure that you statically don't damage any components when you're working and cleaning stuff. Anti-static mats are not very common. I have one at home. Those are large mats with a wire in the corner where you plug it into a ground, either by putting that wire onto your desktop machine itself, or in most of the cases with these anti-static mats, we just plug it into a ground wire of a circuit, any circuit, electrical circuit even. So that mat is basically grounded. Now you can stand on top of that mat knowing that most likely the static electricity will be dissipated out. So those are called anti-static mats. And never use damp clothes to wipe exposed internal components. So please do not try to clean your RAM, for example, using a damp cloth, because most RAM have exposed chipsets. So all the RAM chips are exposed. So if you use a damp cloth, it's going to short circuit things. So please don't do that. And precautions. So if possible, supply power across a UPS, uninterrupted power supply. It should say UPS, not USB. Sorry about that. That should read UPS. So if possible, the power supply across uninterrupted power supply, also known as UPS, not USB, or supply the power through a surge protector, because that will mitigate any power surge situation where things might get fried. Place the devices in a well ventilated area. So if you have the option of placing the device in a ventilated area as opposed to putting inside a closet, please do that, because I have seen even in large corporations and companies, they put their desktop computer in a cabinet. It's not a proper ventilated cabinet, it's just a wooden cabinet, and lock it. That's a bad idea. If you need to provide the security, then place the device in a proper computer cabinets. Don't put it into into a wooden cabinet that is not designed to be a lockable cabinet or a lockable closet for computer devices. That is a bad idea. Place devices in a low dust or dust free area. So that's another option. You can place devices away from dust area. So let's say you are placing a server or a computer for a sawmill. If the sawmill has an office upstairs and that is a little bit dusty, but there's another room that you can put that computer in, Maybe you should ask your end user, maybe you should have your office in that other room instead of the office itself, because office is too dusty. And there is no need for a server to be in the sawmill, a wood processing area. It can be like the servers can be accessible remotely through either network channels or out of band channels or other means, so fiber optic channels. So why would you want to put the server inside the sawmill? So think about those things when you are doing placements, the precautions, right? Then physical security. So there are Kensington slots or K slots available in most available on most devices, from servers to even keyboards. You can buy with K slots on it. So if you're worried about somebody taking devices home or breaking it and stuff, you can use the K slots. You can use lockable closets specifically designed to hold computers and servers. Those are not closets that you buy from IKEA. IKEA might have specific computer closets. Then you need to buy that, not your typical IKEA cabinet for clothes and your groceries and stuff. That's not what you need to use in this case. You need to use specific lockable closets. Typically, those closets are made out of metal, not wood, but the metal closets do exist with fans and ventilation holes in the back or the front or the sides. So lockable closet needs to be a proper lockable closet. Security screws. So if you have a desktop computer or a server, you can use special security screws. Some screws actually do comes with a key. So it's actually a physical key. You need to have a key to open the screw so that you can open the side panel or the back panel. You've probably seen those on servers, but also some desktop computers have those type of keys. So you can use either security screws with the keys on it as well. Tamper stickers. So you can prevent tampering by your end user by putting tamper stickers. When somebody try to remove, the sticker will break. You can buy hundreds of those stickers from eBay and many other places. Amazon has them too. So if you are computer technicians that are supplying devices to your frontline end users, you can put those tamper stickers on wherever the case can be opened. So if the end user open the case, you would know, because they wouldn't have that exact same tamper sticker to reapply, and you will also see the sticker has been broken out. So that's what the tamper sticker do. So you can use those precautions to make sure that you mitigate any issues that might come with people accidentally opening or intentionally opening your cases for your computers. Another important key aspect that some courses may not cover but should cover, in my opinion, is the safety tips. So there are a couple of things that you should know. They include, especially if you're in Canada. I'm Canadian, so I have to explain this from the Canadian point of view, because as a Canadian IT professional, I can't just ignore these safety tips, because these are part of regulations that are already built into Canada's workers' regulations. So they include the Canada Workplace Safety Regulations. That is a regulation administered by the federal government. It's the Justice Department, and that clearly, explicitly highlights the importance of work safety. If you are new to a company and organizations where you just started a job, by regulations and by laws in most provinces and almost in everywhere in Canada, you should receive some kind of a safety briefing. It says in the Canada Workplace Safety Regulations, and if you haven't, that is a pretty bad situation. So make sure you know safety. There's also WHMIS, which is the Workplace Hazardous Material Information System. Even if you are an IT guy who do not directly interact with these materials, you may need those trainings depending on your jurisdiction. So make sure that those are covered by your company. Electrical and electronic safety. That's another one. So this is spelled incorrectly again. Sorry about that. So electrical and electronic safety is also very important. because you are an IT person professional, so you work with computers, servers, and electrical equipment and electronics equipment. You should have some form of a safety training and renewal of those safety training. So you may have gone to university in computer science, in information technology and network engineering, or system administration or something like that. You may have received electrical and electronics safety training there, but it doesn't mean that it is valid forever. You need to have constant training and training renewed by your organization. In Canada, you have a right to refuse unsafe work. Little bit about that. So depending on your organization, if your organization or entity, your company or corporation is actually following the proper laws, they will respect that. However, I have heard horror stories and bad stories about people try to refuse unsafe work and getting fired or let go from their jobs. So be cautious about how you approach the situation. So be careful how you apply those laws, and how you request for more information or refuse to work. But keep in mind, if you believe that you are being unfairly treated or that your rights are being violated, especially with respect to cutting corners on safety and stuff that happen oftentimes, you may speak to your union, the government entity that includes the provincial or territorial governments of Canada, as well as federal government of Canada directly. You may be able to reach either or the other option is the reporting body. So if you are a network engineer in Canada, for example, the Engineers Canada may help you out with that, because it is a professional body that's supposed to be representing all the engineering professionals. If you are a geologist or geophysicist, for example, which I have some background in, again, I can report to, for example, Alberta Professional Engineers and Geoscientists Association, known as APEGA. So you can look into reporting to those bodies. So keep in mind, your safety is more important than anything else, because human life in Western countries, especially, we value more than a computer server, right? So keep that in mind. So here's an image, for example, that we use sometimes in Canada on how to lift heavy boxes. And it shows that this is incorrect way to do it, and this is a correct way to do it, because biological studies, biomechanical studies have been done on what's the best way to lift a box, and this is the best option that we have got, and that's how we recommend you to lift boxes. So things like that. So be cautious about your safety, because your safety is more important than your job, in my opinion. And an organization is putting your safety at risk. You may want to talk to your union, government, or any reporting body. Okay, keep that in mind. And again, I want to emphasize one thing that a lot of young professionals don't know about, is that the safety is an ongoing process. Safety training is an ongoing process. It's not like you joined the company 10 years ago and they give you a VMS training once in a lifetime and it's never going to get repeated. No. Different organizations and different entities and different regions of Canada have different laws governing how often the safety training should be. Typically, it could vary from 1 year to 3 to 4 years. You had to renew those safety trainings based on your job and based on where you work. So keep that in mind. Okay. So it's not just one-time training. You might need repeated training. Actually, you will need repeated training as the time goes by. That's the end of this lecture. Again, if you have any questions or concerns regarding any of the topics that we have covered today, please reach out to me and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Please thumbs up this video and subscribe to my channel. Until the next lesson, good luck and have a nice day.